Good day everyone and welcome back to the 2021 Nest Box season. As you've probably gathered, it has been a tough day in the office for Biddy and Miley. Today, primarily due to bad weather conditions, we lose 4 chicks out of the 6. And I will say this, a little bit of viewer discretion is advised, as Biddy actually removes the dead chicks from the nest, and we'll talk about why she's doing this later. So if you're watching with your kid, maybe watch it first and then decide if you want them to see it or not. And I'll be sure to give you warning before each time it happens. So this day started like any other, bright and early at around 10 to 5. And you can see there seems to be a little bit less chicks active. We were seeing 6 little beaks yesterday, where today you're not seeing that as much. Something very interesting happens here. Something is actually fed to the chick that it can't digest, and it actually ends up regurgitating it. Just look how it plays out. Watching this, I thought the chick was going to be in trouble and maybe choke, but thankfully the mother bird, Biddy, comes in and helps with the situation. And she proceeds to start picking apart the bit of food that was too big for the chick to actually swallow. I have seen numerous times chicks being fed things too big that they can't actually swallow and then have to spit back up, but I'd never seen something get completely regurgitated like that. It was quite interesting. I've also noted sometimes that these two birds, Biddy and Miley, tend to have a lot of trouble sometimes actually feeding the chicks. Particularly Miley, he has a lot of trouble in sometimes getting them to actually take the food off him. I don't know if it's the case of him actually letting go of the food, or the chicks just not grabbing the food off them. Watch as Biddy tries to feed, but then Miley is asking for the food to try himself. And note that you're only really seeing 4 chicks gape for food there. I actually think at this stage, even early hours in the morning, that we had already lost 2 chicks throughout the night. And we noted in the last video that there was some bad weather coming our way, and indeed it hit with force, and bringing a lot of rain and unsettled weather. So why does this affect blue tits so much? Well, blue tits feed on trees, shrubs, and even on the sides of buildings, but they don't venture to the ground to look for food for their chicks. So when it rains heavily, the trees and shrubs all get washed out with the rain. So ground feeding birds such as robins, blackbirds and other thrushes have a field day. But our blue tits don't know to do that. Bushes, trees and shrubs are their environmental niche, and it's their slot of resources that they've evolved to take. And it is a good example of resource partitioning. But as we're going to see, when bad weather comes, this can come back around and bite them. So by the time 8 o'clock comes around, it is really becoming clear that there's not enough food coming into the nest box. This is hard to put across in highlights, as I can only show you the things that have actually happened. But in my opinion, Miley isn't coming in more frequently enough with food. And when he does, like we can see here, he does seem to have an awful hard time in actually feeding the chicks. This could be just down to inexperience. And we see Biddy here bringing in some nesting material of all things. These chicks need food right now, and I can't see the advantage of bringing in nesting material. Maybe she just couldn't find any food. So this is your first warning of the first chick being removed from the nest. So while being tragic, it is a survival tactic that these blue tits implement to try to ensure the survival of the rest of the clutch. But nonetheless, some viewer discretion is advised. We see her here trying to remove the chick from the nest, as I'm sure it's got pushed right down to the bottom of the nest with the other chicks. And the removal of this chick is paramount to the other chick's survival, as a dead chick will slowly decay and possibly bring disease to the nest. She eventually untangles it and takes it out. And quickly life continues as normal for these birds. Their only interest is the survival of the surviving chicks. So at 20 to 9 we can really only see 2 chicks there. Now there are still 4 chicks alive in that nest, but those 2 do seem to be the most liveliest. And this is surely because the lack of food available to bring into the nest box. I'm sure some of you had watched Spring Watch on the BBC, and you would have seen that this year has been a very bad year for blue tits nests. Something like 30 to 40% of blue tits nests have failed in the first 2 weeks. And this, as I said, is all down to that weather. And we can see here the 4 chicks that I mentioned earlier that are still alive. Unfortunately though, 2 of those aren't going to make it throughout the day. This demonstrates the fine line between life and death in these chicks at this age. I have mentioned in previous videos that if they miss feeding, it can be a really bad thing for these chicks. So Miley tends to be coming in every 40 minutes and even sometimes pushing an hour in between his visits sometimes. He really isn't coming in frequent enough to keep all chicks alive and fed. And Biddy needs, on top of all of this, needs to keep the chicks warm also. So while she leaves sometimes, she can't go out and get food all the time. That responsibility has to fall from Miley. But unfortunately, I don't think there is enough food out there at the moment due to the weather. So they're really stuck between a rock and a hard place at the moment. And we can see at half 2, we can just about see 3 chicks. And I don't know about you, but only 2 seem to be pretty lively at this point. And this is the last time we see 3 chicks in the nest, as I'm pretty sure the next 2 die in the meantime. And this brings us to my second warning. Biddy is about to take out the second dead chick. And again, viewer discretion is advised. Again, we see her pulling the chick out from the nest and untangling it, and then promptly leaving the nest with it. And later on, we see Biddy left and there's only 2 chicks left alive in this nest. This is a bad day for blue tits by any standard. Biddy and Miley are surely trying their best, but unfortunately I just don't think there are the resources about at the moment to help these chicks. And I don't know if any of you have ever raised chicks. I've helped chicks, orphan chicks in the past, and when they get hungry, they can get quite difficult to feed as they become weak and then they don't gape for food, which is a vicious cycle that can quickly lead to their death. And we can see Miley here trying to feed his chicks. And the funny thing about this is he actually does it unsuccessfully. he ends up eating the little grub that he has for the chicks himself. I'm personally putting this down to, I think he's a bit of an inexperienced father. And after all that effort, you can see here he actually ends up eating it himself. A vital bit of energy that I'm sure the chicks could have done with. And this brings us to the final viewer discretion. So Biddy is about to remove a dead chick and then promptly come back and remove the last remaining dead chick. Again, we see her pick up the chick first, untangle it from the nest, and then promptly bring it outside. She then comes back a minute later and proceeds to grab the second, or the last remaining chick, should I say. So while yes, this is tragic to see, we have to remember that nature is no fairy tale. The balance of life and death is a fight that these animals have to live and go by every day. And when I see hardships like this, it amazes me that there's anything alive at all out there. That there are these little animals out there winning at life that made it through these trials and tribulations to grow up and to try to rear their own young. And that brings us to Mork and Mindy, who was only at the beginning of their story. She has laid all her eggs and she has actually started to incubating. There is 6 eggs in there, and will she lay a 7th? Who knows, we're gonna have to wait till tomorrow. So she is all that ahead of her, and we're gonna leave it there for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. It was a sad one, but we'll see you in the next one and we'll see how these birds fare out. Bye bye.